Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Sylvia and Peter talking about things and stuff that has to do with mental health and well-being at home or at work. And the thing we want to deal with today is, we could call it self-diagnosis. It's something that Sylvia and I come up against a lot, that people have been to TikTok or Dr. Google, and they have now worked out, I'm definitely suffering from this, that, or the other. And they want help with that. And the question is actually, is self-diagnosis a good thing, bad thing? Um, Within our profession, there are two schools of thoughts. One is that you should diagnose, and another one that says that you should definitely avoid any form of diagnosis and labeling. And so that's not where we want to what we want to talk about. It's more about the self-diagnosis. People have access to all sorts of tools out there. They don't know how to use them, but they do anyway, and they come up with the answer. And then what do we do with that answer? For example, what does an employer do with a self-diagnosis thing in a conversation with an employee? So I have a lot of TikTok diagnoses coming my way that I have to dispel or explain. I don't know, are you up against that as well, Sylvia?
Not directly, but when I was at the college, we used to have quite a lot of that. I've been on to, I did have this quite students. I've been on to self-diagnosis programs on various search engines, and I've completed the self-assessment. And I definitely have an anxiety disorder, or I'm definitely suffering from general depressive disorder. I've even had students tell me they have OCD, even PTSD. And when you ask them, what does your doctor say? What does your GP say? Oh, no, I haven't been there. I've just done this online. And I get a lot of it may be because it is very difficult these days to get an appointment with your GP. And once you have an appointment with your GP, to go the assessment route and get a diagnosis route. And I do find that is quite a thing these days. But this self-diagnosis in general seems to be quite a thing, especially with so many self-diagnosis tools available online. And also for neurodiversity too. I get people telling, well, I've got ADHD. Have you had a diagnosis? Oh no, I've done an online assessment. Um, yes, there is a genuine problem with mental health, or be specific, poor mental health in the country at the moment and in general. But I wonder how many of those are from self-diagnosed mental health problems, for want of a better phrase. I do think it's becoming a bit of a minefield, really. And as you pointed out, Peter, if you have an employee or you have a student that comes in and says, I've been diagnosed with, how does the employer respond to that? Do they challenge that? And then where does that lead to? The employee might say, do you not believe me? Where's privacy? Where's confidentiality? Has the employer are they allowed to challenge that? What do they do about the challenge? Do they actually have to ask the employee, can you bring me in your diagnosis, or can we bring in proof? I mean, where does those sort of conversations lead us? But I do find it is becoming quite an issue, this self-diagnosis. And I'd just like to add as well that, the self-diagnosis that might be there, but those that have a diagnosis from a GP or hospital, that route, if someone says, for example, oh, my OCD is really bad today, and you've got someone that has a clinical diagnosis, it's almost like a flippancy, and almost sort of, it can be very harmful to those that have those diagnoses, because then do they speak up? Because then they've got to disclose that they have a diagnosis, and then they challenge the other person. I mean, it's a very, very tricky place to be, although recognizing a lot of people will do it because they can't get to their GP. But when there's so many different providers of these assessments as well. Where's that assessment coming from? There's no consistency, there's no continuity. What is the baselines for all these different online assessments? It's a very, very tricky place at the moment, and some might say quite a downward spiral, really, for many people.
We see it as you talked about in the workplace, where it's a difficult thing to deal with, because is this real? Is this imagined? Who do we trust? Who do we not? What do we say? What do we not?
Mm.
Even worse, I think it starts already in children at school,
Yes.
where more and more children talk about their mental health issues, and other kids who really don't actually suffer from anything want to be part of the greater group, and therefore they start thinking, oh yeah, I've got this as well, because now we've got something in common. So I think that there's a lot of misconceptions out there, what is and what isn't, and I'm not quite sure who is really there to tell that no, you do not have anxiety.
Mm.
Might have had a fright,
Mm.
because to you and I, anxiety means something, but to the uninitiated, it may mean something completely different. So I have clients telling me, oh, I've got ADHD, I can't focus. I ask a few questions, and to me, it's clear that it's a simple case of stress.
Mm.
It also has the same symptoms as being unable to focus. So to the clinicians, something may not be as dramatic as it is to the client, who thinks, oh, the world is coming apart because I've read this and I've seen that, and my next door neighbor this. And so there's a lot of stigma, and there's a lot of misconceptions that we also have to weed out, that somehow interfere with all of this well-meant initiative to give clarity, because a lot of people do want to know what's going on.
Yes.
So if you want to know what's going on, you have to come up with some kind of a diagnosis, or an explanation at least. And if you can do that in a controlled environment, that's great. But my concern really is the availability of all manner of sources, more or less proven and credible sources, that will give you any answer to any question. And
Mm.
then, depending on how vulnerable you are at the time, you will believe somebody on TikTok you never met before, who has no background of anything worth mentioning, but
Mm.
who knows everything.
And that's the thing, isn't it? It'd be interesting as an experiment to go on several of these assessment tools and answer the questions and see what diagnosis each one comes up with. Because as we know, under ICD-11, there's certain criteria that GPs, doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists will use to determine, and it's all in context. Someone that doesn't have a great support team versus someone who does, and you take all the different criteria, then a diagnosis will be made. It's not as cut and dried as answer yes and no and how many times on a self-assessment tool. And there's also the added, just as what's popped up for me just now, is if something, that example you used there of someone not concentrating, why does that person feel they need to go and have a diagnosis when it's simply they're not concentrating and potentially just need to knuckle down and learn to concentrate? Why is this necessity for so many people to be able to, what's the word? Pin their hat on a label. There's a label for that and a label for this. Anxiety, as you say, it's a normal human emotion and feeling that we can all have. But why are people jumping to anxiety when it could be nerves, could be worry, apprehension, concern, but so many people are jumping to anxiety. You and I can get anxious, or could, but we don't all get depressed or have depression. It's very, very different. It's just an interesting development in society today with the growth of AI and technology, that now we have this self-diagnosis. But as I say, it comes full circle back to how do people deal with that self-diagnosis? Employers, schools. Picking up on a point you said earlier about anxiety, my friends little girl came home. She's 5 years old. She came home a few months ago, and my friend asked her what she'd been doing at school today. And she said, I've learnt about anxiety at 5. Now, yes and no. I get encouraging people to know what anxiety is, but the flip side, as we spoke before, you get what you pay attention to. So are we not creating this anxiety? And then you follow that on with, oh, I'll just go and check on whatever assessment tool I happen to find. Oh yeah, look, I've ticked all the boxes, and yes, I have. It's just simply life's ups and downs quite often.
And there are certainly research papers coming out now showing that all this awareness leads to actually what it was intended to prevent. That the more aware we become, the more we think we've got what it is that we've now become aware of. And
Yeah,
that was not that was not the intention, was it?
it's true. Yeah, yeah.
And you can't stop people thinking and self-diagnosing. That's not what you and I are suggesting. I mean, anyone who goes to the doctor has some sort of idea in their head that, oh, I think I've got this or I've got that. And then hopefully they let the doctor figure out what it is.
Mm,
Yes, it is tennis elbow or it is something else.
mm,
Um, but are we creating a world of anxious and scared people that we
mm,
think we must feel something that has a label?
mm,
I don't know. I don't think we should get down that road.
mm,
Awareness about mental good health in between health and poor mental health is great. We need
mm,
to know the variations on the theme because those variations have always been there.
mm,
We now know more about it and we talk more about mental health in general, the good, the bad, and the indifferent, which is exactly the way it should be. But it shouldn't lead us to think that we must suffer from something or
mm,
have something. We must have a label. I don't
mm,
think that's a healthy route to go down.
But it's become quite a trend to going on these self-assessment tools, and TikTok and all these other
And
tools and getting a diagnosis. But what happens next once you
exactly what happens next, because you can't talk to these tools.
mm, mm,
I've tried some of them and okay, I didn't know I had this particular problem, but the way I answered the questions,
mm,
I had a problem, but no, I don't.
mm,
So I just wonder, you who have been watching this, have you ever tried some of those self-assessment tools?
mm,
What's your experience? Do you want to tell us about it?
yeah.
Uh, just the general idea of what does it feel like? Did you get different answers to the same question using different tools?
Mm.
So on that note, I think we should let people off the hook and
Yeah,
take those
I'll go.
labels off and get
I'll go
real.
try a couple.
So thank you very much for watching and see
See
you in the
you
next
later.
video.
Bye bye.